Hey guys, Joe Miles here with Osseo Gear. This is the Mission Whitetail podcast. We're going to be doing a deep dive into what it truly takes to kill these mature bucks. We're going to step outside the box and look at the why for gear, tactics, training, and more importantly, the mindset from over 35 years of chasing these magnificent animals all over North America. Thank you for following along and welcome to Mission Whitetail.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Mission Whitetail podcast, episode 19. Rolling right along here, man. It's not going to be long. We'll be closing in on a whole year of this stuff.
Yeah, it was like a freaking blink of an eye, and it's gone.
Well, guys, the title of today's episode is Stacking the Deck, and meaning, you know, all the things you can do to put the odds in your favor. But before we get into that, maybe we'll do a quick season update. I just got back from Mexico and actually put this podcast together on my notes on the phone, going through that. I did have a successful trip. Shot a pretty good 10 down there. Got the whole thing on video, so I think I know it'll be, you know, some footage we can put together, but I think the Team 200 crew is going to use it and maybe the Deer Society. So that's good. Kev, I've been out of town for about 2 weeks. What you been up to?
I've been holding it down, old son.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. I've hunted a little bit, but nothing really good has been showing up in the local spot. So, and we've been so freaking busy at work. It's been hard to get away. So, just holding it down and trying to keep the fires out.
What about the bow, the custom bow stuff? What's going on with that?
Just got a handful of guys, good bit of guys wanting bows tuned and arrows built. We're just waiting until we slow down a little bit to get going, but we got a bunch of guys lined up. I actually been looking around for a Hoyt Venom Pro. I kind of switched to the dark side recently to mess around.
I'm not sure how I feel about that.
And I actually found one for a really good deal and bought it and set it up, and it's shooting darts. So I might try to zap a doe or a decent buck before the end of the season. We'll see. What
axle to axle did you go with?
That one's a 30. I figure with my draw length, I don't really need a longer bow, and I liked how maneuverable that one was. So I went to the pro shop and I shot the new Phase 4, the VTM, and the Venom Pro 30.
And that's the Venom Pro 30 is last year's model.
Yep, that was last year's, and I really was going toward the Hoyts a little bit, and I was like, for the money, I just shoot the Venom Pro. So found a deal on it, really like it, and it's shooting really well. It was easy to tune. So
what about all right, Phase 4, obviously that's the new Matthews, the VTM is the new Hoyt. What did you see? I mean, I know the draw cycles, and this isn't an episode on bow selection, but just quickly, because I know a lot of guys are going to start, you know, getting to be around Christmas and all that, maybe start looking at new bows for next year. But did you see a big difference between the Venom, the VTM, the Phase, and the VXR or V3X?
Yeah, so I shot all the I shot all the shorter bows. I'm looking for a shorter bow for the rest of this year and next year, and they all shot the same, it seemed like, compared to the prior year bow. So I did like the VTM 31, and it might have been just in my head, but that extra inch, everybody could use an extra one of those.
Keep going.
That extra inch helped with the string angle. It felt like it might have just been in my head. I didn't actually measure the axle to axle to see what they were measuring out to. But that one felt maybe a hair better. But for the money, the Venom Pro was plenty good. And if I was going to get something else, I would just get the V3X29 because that phase was like the same exact thing. If you want those $250 new fancy stabilizers that you can only put on that new phase bow, then get that one. But it's literally the same bow. And same with the VTM. It might be a little bit different on paper, but it shot and draw cycle and everything was the same.
So no new overwhelming bells and whistles.
No.
I'm anxious to do. I am going to shoot the phase against the V3X just to see. They talk about how much quieter. It's 20% quieter or whatever. We're going to test that and see.
Yeah, we'll test it, but I don't think it might be 2%.
Yeah. It's interesting how they calculate all that, but that's a good update. Let's dive in, man, and get into what we want to talk about today, which is stacking the deck and how you put the odds in your favor. So I'm going to go on a little spiel here. So we talk about this all the time about setting your goals and what you want to do. As a whitetail bow hunter, what is your goal? And so we're going to look at this as I want to shoot 170-inch deer. That's my goal. I think that's a lot of guys' goals, and that's a lofty goal, and it takes a heck of a lot of work to do that. And we're going to look at it from a guy that's got to travel to go and do that. Guys that live in the Midwest, they'll get some stuff out of this, I think, as well. But we're kind of looking at this from a guy that's got to travel from say Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Florida. A guy that's got to go to where these deer are. And the first thing always is you've established your goal. I want to shoot 170-inch deer. Where can I do that? And that seems pretty simple, but it's actually not. There's a ton of work that has to go into that. The first thing you need to do, or the first thing I do, is look at the states where I'm guaranteed to get a tag, right? Yep. So where are those? Where can I get an over-the-counter tag? You're looking at Western Kentucky or Kentucky in general. Western Kentucky has good deer. Ohio has good deer, as you know. Illinois, you can get a tag there every year. And then, Missouri, you can get a tag. Outliers are places like Mexico, Texas, Alberta. Those are probably not super practical to a lot of people. But those are places where you can kill a Boone and Crockett as well. But it's going to take some not weird, but it's going to take some special circumstances to get it done in those areas. But obviously the bucks are there. The reason you want to look at places you can be guaranteed to get a tag, like I killed my buck in Kansas this year, but Kansas is getting harder and harder and harder to get drawn. They're talking about it becoming as hard as Iowa. And if you go in there and you find a lease or a couple of properties and then you don't get drawn for a year or 2 years, you've invested that money, you're going to have to pay it over and over for that lease just because you didn't get drawn. Now, you could let somebody go and hunt your property and try and recover money, but that is not stacking the deck. Mm-hmm. You're stacking the deck. So to stack the deck, you want to be able to understand the property, learn it, and be able to hunt it each season. Especially obviously when it has a buck in there of the caliber you're going after. So that would be the first thing that you need to do is determine the state or states that you want to get, that you can get drawn in, and then it's time to start finding the spots. And you can really do that three ways. We're going to leave public hunting out of this. That's a whole different animal.
Yeah.
You can do it by getting permission. You can do it by buying, and you can do it by leasing. And those are the three ways to do it. And I see this a lot, and I fell into this same category. I would say, okay, I need to get a lease in Illinois because I know I can get a tag there, and I know I can get it. I know that I have connections there to be able to get a good property. So I would get a lease. And it would be a pretty substantial size lease, and I would split it with a guy or two. that is not stacking the odds in your favor. And why is that? Because when you have multiple guys hunting it, you got multiple people hunting different ways, so you're way better off having your own spot if you want to stack the odds in your favor. And you're way better off having 3 or 4 properties. And you know, I really started seeing that probably the past 2 or 3 years. I would much rather have 300-acre tracts that are all within an hour of each other versus one 300-acre tract, because I'm trying to find that 170-inch deer, and you can get into different deer herds when you have that. So in a perfect world, and obviously everybody financially is different, but as far as putting the work in to get permission spots, you know, that's kind of an equal playing field as far as, you know, putting in the work to find those. You know, the harder you work, the more stones you unturn or turn over, the more your chances go up there. So if in a perfect world going after 170-inch deer, I would want 2 or 3 options to myself in Illinois and in Ohio. Have 2 different states, or better yet, Ohio and Western Kentucky. And why would it be those 2, you think?
They're not too far from each other.
That's one, yep.
And Ohio, Western Kentucky, I don't know. I just know they got giants there. That's why I'd be there.
Very true. Kentucky opens the first Saturday in September, so you can do an early season bean field hunt there. Ohio goes all the way into February, so you can do late season food hunting there too, and both of them have ruts. The problem with Kentucky is the rifle rut. Yeah, the rifle season, you've got like 3 weeks or 3 weekends of rifle hunting. But again, if you find a spot that's an urban area or backs up to bow hunting only or backs up to no hunting, you can find a spot in Western Kentucky. But that way you're covering early season all the way to super late season. And if you had 3 properties in Ohio, 3 properties in Western Kentucky that you could hunt, you are stacking the odds of finding that 170-inch deer.
But don't go there because there aren't any deer there. So just leave it alone if you're listening.
No, I think, you know, I'd be interested to see if guys, and we'd love that feedback. If some guys take what we're talking about right now and put it into action, and now is the time. You know, the seasons are still in both of those states, but now is the time, right now, December, that you start knocking on the doors, you start trying to get your leases lined up, and it's going to take discipline and work to kill a 170-inch deer. And the first, I mean, you can have the best gear, you can be the best shot in the world, but if you don't have places to hunt what your goal deer is, then it's a moot point. It does. Yep. I mean, those skills, we're going to get into that next, but I cannot drive home enough the importance of having access and control of your hunting, where you're not competing with another hunter or couple of hunters to capitalize on a deer of that quality. I mean, it stacks the deck in your favor when you have that, and that's what we're talking about is how you do that.
Yep.
So I think that drives home the point of getting access to the best possible places you can, and have multiple properties. You know, if it's a 20-acre tract, a 10-acre tract, and a 4-acre tract, you know, that have really good sign in there, that's what I would do instead of getting one, you know, larger tract. Now, obviously, you've got to start somewhere, but you can grow into that. You know, you're not going to, well, you may, but you're probably not going to roll into a good part of Ohio and pick up 3 really good tracts right off the rip. But you have to work at it, and you have to build. So you got to get your foot in the door, and you just got to start.
Yep.
You know, it's guys always talk about, I can't lose any weight. You know, you got to start. You got to get outside and run. You got to put that first foot forward and go and try and find the properties.
Right.
All right, I think we've beat that horse dead enough. Now we can get kind of more into your wheelhouse here, Kev. Let's talk about gear and your equipment check. And we hit on this a little bit with bows, arrows, broadheads, rest, releases, sights, all of that stuff. I don't know, this is maybe not going to come across right, but you really do need to be super proficient and understand that stuff.
Yeah.
We're talking about stacking the deck, and you don't have to have a $1,500 bow.
Nope.
You don't have to have the elite most straight arrows on earth. You don't have to have the sight with the slider and the micro adjust, and you don't have to have all that, but those things certainly can help you. But the point is understanding your equipment and getting super, super proficient with it. I can't stress that enough. I see it, or we see it so much, not throwing anybody under the bus here, but a buddy is going back to Mexico with me here in about 10 days, 7 days. It's this Saturday. And he got his bow set up last week.
Yeah, I remember that.
So, I mean, you can't.
And he was frantic, too.
I know. But
I need it by tomorrow. Okay.
So, but that's the point of that. With all your you're trying to stack the deck. You need to be shooting. You're hunting now. You're keeping your bow sighted in. You're keeping a few reps in when you can. But January, February, season's out. Start understanding your bow. Start understanding timing. Start understanding correct draw length. Start understanding arrow tuning. It's fun. It gives you something to do in the off season. And the more proficient you are, the more accurate you are, the more lethal you're going to be. And that's ultra important when you're stacking the deck in your favor.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with having the best you can afford and all that, but to your point earlier, you gotta hunt the big bucks where the big bucks live. So I think that's number one. But being proficient doesn't matter if it's the the most expensive stuff or the least expensive stuff. But one of my biggest things besides being able to shoot well is being able to, if you're a mobile hunter, basically set up quietly and be able to do it basically with your eyes closed. So when you're in the dark, you're in the morning or whatever, you're not clanging and banging, and you can you can throw that set up pretty proficiently and quietly. That's one of the main things that I focus on, and silencing all that metal and all that, taking the time to cover up your buckles and your sticks from making noise. I think that's been a big help for me the past couple of years.
So we can even, we're going to get into, more of the stand stuff, but I guess that kind of segues right into it. So let's walk through stacking the deck once you have the property.
Okay.
Or the properties. In my opinion, in my experience, having preset stands hung in funnels and pinch points gives you an advantage and stacks the deck. And why is that? The reason that is because I don't care how we're going two ways with this. This is not to offend people that have permanent stands. This is not to offend guys that are mobile run and gun guys. But you can't convince me that having to go in and hang a stand in the dark is more advantageous from, I'll get to the why, than having a preset stand that you can sneak in and just climb right up in. And that comes from a noise perspective, and it comes from a scent perspective. Because I don't care how slow you go and how cold it is out, if you've got to go in and hang that stand, you're going to get heated up. You're absolutely going to get heated up. Now, the flip side of that is the technique you're talking about, being able to do that efficiently and effectively in the dark, or not in the dark. It gives you an advantage with being able to move, because the preset stands are great, but a lot of times things can change and the deer can move. You can have a neighbor that bumps them. There's a million things that can happen, and your funnel is dead and it's not going to work, and you need to be able to move, and you need to have an understanding. So if you're going to stack the deck, you need to have permanent sets that are in really obvious locations and kill spots, but then you also need to be absolutely deadly and understand mobile hunting. You can't be in one camp or the other.
Right.
You got to be able to do both of them. And Don Higgins, I hope you're listening, you do need to understand the saddle side of things.
Yeah.
Because there are 100% opportunities to hunt in trees that you just can't get a lock on in. And, I've seen you do this over the last, 3 or 4 years, your ability to get into any tree and get in fast, with your mobile saddle setup it's impressive. I mean, it's really impressive. And a lot of, we used them in Texas or I did, and you would have never gotten a lock on in any of those trees.
I was thinking about that the other day when we got in that wasn't even really a tree. It was like a giant bush. We were in there like 6 feet off the ground and a bunch of thorns, and you shot that nice old buck. But yeah, I'm like you. I 99% of the time I'll have something preset if it's a morning hunt and I'm going in there in the dark. And usually I hunted there the afternoon prior, did a hanging hunt, and then I just leave the sticks in the tree, or I have another spot, not too far that's already prepped for the next morning, and I just go right back in there the next morning. A few of my main spots that are local, I already have trees prepped with the sticks or screw-in steps or something already in the tree. But yeah, 99% of the time the tree is already prepped for the morning hunt from either earlier this season or the afternoon before.
Yep. So what this is kind of how I would go about it, starting now December. Again, we're looking at access, new properties, adding properties to your place where you can get tags. And then I am going there and obviously scouting if I don't already know the properties, and that's going to be probably a March timeline. Mm-hmm. And I'll go ahead and get some stands hung then, some permanent stands hung there then that I probably won't hunt until the following rut. But I'll go ahead and get them hung. I'll look because everybody knows this, but you can see all the trails. Mm-hmm. You can see the rubs. You can see how they were navigating those pinch points. And guess what? You live in, we'll just say South Carolina, you've got to drive to Ohio in March. That's not really a time to be out doing that stuff, but it's going to pay off the following November. So that's a commitment to leave, work on a Friday at lunch and be home Sunday. But it gives you, a full day and a half, 2 days to get work done on those properties and go ahead and get some stands hung in March. So that's out of the way. Some pre-hung stands or at least some trees prepped. And I'm bouncing around all over the place because my notes are kind of scattered here.
All right.
But getting back into, so that would be December, January, February, March.
So what you're saying is don't wait till August to start looking for your new spots.
And that happens. But it's like everything else. You've got to be playing chess and thinking ahead always. Even like the tracks buck. I had a real good plan on killing him this year, and I had studied that thing for months, years studied that property and put little bits of information together and figured out a really good spot to kill him.
Yep.
But I was not stacking all my eggs in that basket. I had 2 other properties in Kansas that I could hunt. One of them had a really good buck on it. Our farm had a couple of good bucks on it, and I had stands prepped and ready for those spots. That the tracks buck was the buck I was after, but I had absolute backup plans and three different properties I could have hunted in Kansas. Where I dropped the ball, and this is going to sound probably, I don't know that arrogant is the right thing or greedy, but where I dropped the ball this year was thinking that the tracks buck was going to take up my entire rut, and I killed him way pre-rut, and then I had no backup plan for after that. So I went pretty much blind into Western Kentucky, and I went pretty much blind into Ohio, whereas if I had spent a lot more time last March, last February, exploring Kentucky, exploring Ohio, getting back into Illinois, it's a super good problem to have, but that's something that I need to improve on, to stack the deck, because I was blind basically the entire rut, because I'd put all my eggs into Kansas, and I was blind for the rut. So that's something that I can definitely improve on and am planning on improving on. All right, so let's get back into gear since we're bouncing around all over the place. I'm having some attention deficit disorder issues.
That's a normal day for us.
Yes, that is very true. So back into gear for a second. You need to, or we need to, as bow hunters, we talked about being really proficient, but you got to try everything out. And it's not, we talk about golf course syndrome or backyard syndrome with your equipment. You go out and shoot your bows in the backyard, at your block target, and it's sighted in, and I'm sighted in, I'm good to go. I'll shoot, every weekend when I can. But think of it as being a pro, if you will, doing things the pro way. And when we were on this past Mexico hunt, 2 of the guys, we had a real foggy morning, and their rangefinders weren't working in the fog. And so I thought about that. Now I have tested my stuff a lot in the fog, and I have range-finding binoculars, and they work very well, especially at bow hunting distances in the fog. But that's something you should test with your equipment. You get a foggy morning, you get a rainy, foggy day, or whatever, hop out just outside your second story or whatever. Test your rangefinder, see how it does in the fog. If it doesn't do good, try some other models. Find one that does work in the fog, because it absolutely could have cost somebody a deer that day.
Yep.
They were ranging, and they knew it was over 20 yards, and their range was saying 7 yards. And if that had been a shooter that came in, having that piece of equipment did not stack the deck in anybody's favor. Another thing is piggybacking on that. This is just one example. Becoming really proficient at judging yardage.
Yeah.
We sit for hours and hours and hours in the stand flipping through social media pages. Man, take 15 minutes and look at a spot and say, that's 18 yards. Range it. It's 24. Okay, that ain't good. The more and better you get at that in hunting situations, if your rangefinder, if the battery dies, if it shorts out, if it's foggy and you're not getting a range, and you can get within 2 or 3 yards in bow ranges, you're going to save yourself. So that's one example. But all of your equipment, when you talk about, I've got a whole section here on training. that's an off-season thing, an in-season thing, something that you can keep doing. You can never be a good enough shot. Something that we like to do is get in physical shape.
Yeah.
You know, do you need to be a world-class Olympic cage fighting athlete to kill a deer? No, you don't have to be. But I can promise you, after 2 weeks of running and gunning, your brain is gonna tell you not to climb over that next limb and hang the stand. It's good enough right here. Or, I really don't need to break this down and move it because I don't feel like it. The better shape that you're in physically, the better you're going to perform hunting. I am a 100% believer in that, and you can never be in good enough shape.
Yeah, I've hung some sets this year where the tree is, I got to be putting the sticks on this side of the tree so I can get over on the other side of the tree, and I'm hanging on for dear life the whole time, and I got my lineman's belt freaking cinched down, and I'm like, man, I'm glad I at least did something during the off season, because this would suck. Or carrying all your gear on your back, your sticks in your stand or your platform, it wears on your shoulders and everything, and in your back and your legs after a mile or so. So for sure, I resonate with that a lot.
Yeah, so it's good for you overall health wise. Yeah. So training and staying in physical shape is a lifestyle, and it's something that's definitely going to stack the deck in your favor. If you're able to get over that limb, if you're able to carry your stuff further, that's going to stack the deck, and that's what we're talking about, is putting odds in your favor. And I can promise you, a guy that are equal in their hunting abilities, the one that's in better shape is going to perform better and be able to stay in the game longer.
Yep.
Training from as far as shooting your bow, you need to practice shooting from elevated positions. Whether that's hanging a deer stand in your backyard, shooting out of a second-story window, you need to know how your bow shoots from an elevated position. Again, 90% of the guys are shooting in the backyard on a flat surface, at a deer target or a block target, and that's the extent of it. But in a real hunting situation, that's not normally what you get. You're normally, obviously, we're hunting from trees, so you need to practice from trees. And how many times has it when you've shot a deer, has it gone just like normal practice? You pull back, you anchor, you're smooth, and you fire the shot. That doesn't happen a lot of times. It very rarely does.
Yeah, usually never for me.
So we created a drill that I think is really helpful. We call it the timing drill, and you do it with a buddy, and you get in an elevated position, and you have 3 or 4 targets. Now, ideally, this will take some effort and some work like everything else, but take 2 or 3 of your deer targets to the woods, hang a stand. You can take 2 or 3 guys, and a guy climbs up in the stand. You've got a target at 8 yards, 17 yards, 42 yards in the woods, in shooting lanes, and the guy draws his bow and he holds it. Just like if a deer was coming in, you draw your bow, you hold it, and then the guy says 42. The guy on the ground to the shooter in the tree says 42. So that's the target, and then you've got 5 seconds to execute the shot. So your bow's drawn, you don't know which target you're shooting at, and you go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and during that time frame, and it really, really does help.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll amplify. If you have bad target panic, maybe not do that one so early. It'll amplify the real world situation, but I guess it'll help in the long run, because it's like an actual real world where you don't have a long window to settle in and shoot. You got to get on them quick and put the pin where it needs to be.
And holding the bow back.
Yeah.
You know, you got to be able to, because that's another thing. You know, I've held the bow for a minute and a half. Mm-hmm. So do that. Pull your bow back, have a timer, and hold it for 2 minutes. Just pull it back and hold it for 2 minutes and see how that feels, so it's not new to you if that happens in the woods. Again, stacking the deck. These are little things that probably seem mundane or not necessary, and they aren't necessary. You don't have to do them to kill deer, and there's guys that don't do this stuff, and they kill big deer every year. But we're stacking the deck, and we're looking at little things, little details that can help all of us be more successful.
Control what you can control.
Absolutely control what you can control. So that's some shooting drills that you can do. Let's see what else we've got here. Oh, I did this. I talked about this the other day. Again, a little bit outside the box. Learn to shoot with your fingers. You know, if your release breaks, if you don't have a backup release, if you drop it out of the tree, how does your bow shoot with just your fingers? And we're not talking about 70 yards here. We're talking about maybe only 10, 15 yards, but do you know? You know, do you know what, you know, everybody's got a D-loop now. They got their release on, they pull back and they shoot. What happens if all that malfunctions? What happens if your D-loop comes loose? Can you pull the bow back with your fingers and execute a good shot? Or what happens? How far off are you? You know, if you try that and you miss a 10-yard target by 10 feet, then you know, if that happens, you're just out of the game. But if you can still execute a good lethal shot, you should at least try it and know. Mm-hmm. Quiver on, quiver off. You need to know how to shoot both ways. You need to practice with your quiver on to see how that works. Now, if you're a guy that leaves your quiver on all the time, then you don't necessarily need to know how to shoot with it off. But if you're a guy that shoots with his quiver off, what happens if you're climbing in the stand and here he comes and you haven't had time to take your quiver off, or you're walking in or you're walking out? You need to know how to shoot with your quiver on, quiver off. Let's see here. Peep rotation. It happens.
It's a real pisser.
You draw back and your peep's rotated. Can you execute a shot without your peep? You know, if you put the turn peep on the side of your pin, where are you going to hit? You know, you ought to practice that and know, you know, you're covering all your bases just to be sure. Seated and standing. You know, I hear guys all the time say, I only shoot seated or I only shoot standing. Well, that might not be the case. You know,
what about half and half when you're crouching down under a limb?
Crouching, hidden dragon.
Yeah.
Yes, all of that. You need to have at least at minimum an understanding of what happens when you are in those situations that aren't normal. When you're standing up, when you're sitting down, you know, those are times. I think somebody just poked their head out.
I think so. We're back.
We are back. So all those are points that you need to at least explore, and they can save you in a pinch.
Yeah.
All right, moving on to funnels, stacking the deck, funnels, and what can you do in your funnels. Most people that are listening to this know what a funnel is. A terrain funnel, meaning a creek, a river, some structure that is forcing the deer to travel a certain way. And when you find one of those that have big buck sign in one end or the other, those are money, and that's what you're looking for. And you have to figure out how to access those for different wind directions. But you know, something we talked about with Bobby Worthington and something we run into here is flatland funnels. They can be really hard to find. And what you can do in March, April, May, you can enhance your funnels, meaning you can drop trees, meaning you've got a 100-yard wide. That's the best you can find. obviously and you need to be on one side or the other, so that's 100 yards across.
Mm-hmm.
You can stack trees this time of year, or March, April in the off season. You can drop a few trees. They call it hinge cutting, where you just fall the tree. That's going to force deer movement a certain way. I've seen guys put cattle panels in woods. I've seen them hang wire in woods where it's, if you've got permission to hunt a spot or you've got a lease, you got to know the rules or the laws, or what the landowner will and won't let you do. But anything you can do to tighten that pinch. Now, you don't want to tighten it all the way down to where, it's a 10-yard gap.
Yeah.
Because they'll get really nervous about that. But if you can just steer them 20 yards, that can really help. Dropping a tree, stacking some brush, putting in a cattle panel here or there in your funnels, again, stacking the deck in your favor. You want to add anything to that, Kev?
Another thing Bobby was saying is he would either find scrapes in those funnels or put mock scrapes, put some zip tie limbs and licking branches in those areas where he wanted to hang a set in those funnels, and it will help, get them in bow range and help get them to stop in bow range without having to make any noise at them.
Yep. Scrapes are a huge part of, what we do as hunting, mock scrapes. And that's something, I've got written here is once you've improved your funnels, that's something you can do this minimal. It's not putting in a food plot. It's not going in and completely, setting up bedding areas and hinge cutting a bunch of a guy's timber. You can drop a couple of trees and enhance your funnels. So that's something that you can be doing in the off season, along with getting better and better and better with your equipment, is enhance your funnels. So you've got more land access in states where you can get a tag where your goal type deer is. You're going to get better with all your equipment. You're going to train, and you're going to enhance your funnels. You're going to tighten them up. You're going to replace maybe some old brush that you've stacked up or whatever. That's something that you can do that's a minimal manipulation to a guy's property, and you can probably get permission to do that, especially if it is a cattle panel or something like that where you can remove it. So that's, 2 cattle panels. What are they, 16 feet long? That's 32 feet. I'm no mathematician, but if you put that on both ends,
that shrinks it down a good bit.
Yeah. So those are things you can do in your rut funnels, this time of year. And then not this time of year, but March, April. And then July, August, that becomes a real critical time. That's when you can get those mock scrapes in. You can get those rope scrapes in. One thing, this was my first year trying the rope scrapes, and what handicapped me was the chemical smell of those ropes. Mm-hmm. Man, I put those things out for 2 months, a whole roll of the hemp rope, and man, I could not get the smell out. It was unbelievable. And so I ended up soaking I cut them up into pieces, soaked them in a big tote with a bunch of baking soda, and that helped, but it still didn't do it. And I went out and hung a few of them, and the deer would absolutely not touch them. And it wasn't until like a month ago that I had the first mature buck actually even go up and look at it. But the point of that is you can, right now, December, can go ahead and get your rope, cut it up, throw it outside, soak it in water and baking soda, and then just let them weather. Just absolutely let them weather. Then in July, go in and set them up, set your mock scrapes up. Go ahead and if you've got them, get your cell cams into those rut funnels that you're not going to be hunting until October. It's not overfeed, so some good AA lithium batteries are going to last a long time in a funnel because you're not going to be getting a ton of traffic through there. So you can go ahead and get those, cell cams in there. One thing about it, if you did go in February, March, April, and hang some preset stands, July and August, when you're in there putting the cameras in, putting the mock scrapes in, you can cut shooting lanes in.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everything's greened up. Everything is, you know, climb up in those stands, check them, get everything prepped for that end of October through November 25th time frame, July and August, in those states where you're going to be hunting, and get all that prepped. You can also, you know, do some loops in there, see if you missed anything, you know, get all that done July, August, and then get out of there. Get absolutely out of there, and you're going to let your cell cams tell you what's going on. And if you do get something that's repeatable, you know, 2, 3, 4 times of a big deer coming through there at an, you know, people talk about the October lull. We've talked about it, but if you do get a big deer coming through there during that time of year, and it's 2, 3, 4 times, you've got some good wind, you've got some good cold weather coming that's unseasonably, man, you can get in there and kill that deer early. If not, then you're going to wait until that end of October, pre-rut, rut period for those rut funnels, and you're going to get in there. And funnel hunting, a lot of guys talk about it, but real funnel hunting can be taxing.
Yeah.
It can be miserable, taxing hunting. It can be a mind game, to say the least, because you're sitting in this area for hours and hours and hours and seeing very little deer. It's not a field edge. You know, it's not where you can see maybe hundreds and hundreds of yards. You're probably not going to see a lot of deer, but man, it so stacks it in your favor. Eventually he's going to come through there with a doe, or he's going to come through there searching for a doe, and you got to be there.
Yep. Yeah, it really heightens the odds sitting in the funnels, because if he does come in there, he's going to be in range and you're going to get a shot at him. So it's definitely worth it. I was telling you earlier, I've never stepped foot on this property in the upstate, that a buddy said I could go check out, and I just walked down, and there's 2 ridges on this creek bottom, and I just walked down along both the ridges until I found where they kind of pinched down, and I got right in the middle where I was shooting 30 yards at the furthest here and 30 yards here, and got on some creek crossings. I was on the wrong crossing, but I saw plenty of deer. Could have shot a young buck if I was just a little bit further down the creek, but I saw 4 deer that sit just doing a hanging hunt, never been there.
So that's a great point. You would never set foot on this property, but you knew the sign to look for. You knew that you needed to find a funnel, and you were you were using terrain features. You got into a creek crossing where 2 hills came down and pinched everything down, and what happened? You saw deer. Now you amplify that in an area that's got the caliber bucks that you want. You saw that in early December, this is where they were using. And so the intel you just gathered from that experience is exactly what we're talking about. Because let's say it was a booner that you had seen. You know, it was Ohio, and this is South Carolina. But let's say it's South Carolina, and you're after a 125, a record book deer in South Carolina, and you've found out that there is a deer on this property. You have now figured out, okay, December they're using the crossing that's 70 yards from where I thought, but maybe November they were using the one that you were on, and if you had text cams on both those, and you had set all that up in February, and you had gone in there in February and maybe enhanced that funnel just a little bit, you're stacking the deck in your favor, and guess what? Next November, next December, you're zipping an arrow through that buck right there in that spot, and you learned it in one day.
Yep. Yeah, and I kind of took a little more laid back, less aggressive approach than what I usually do, because it's later season and I can see further with the foliage off the trees. But so the first Good Creek crossing, I walked in from like a main highway, the first Good Creek crossing I found with those gradual slopes that pinched down into that flat. I sat there, but I told myself, if anything, it'll be an observation sit, and I got to go back up there next weekend. So I'm just going. I already picked out a tree from the tree I was in. I know where I'm going, and that's obviously the main crossing down there for this time of year. So I got really good intel, because I don't know if I would have blown in there and went another 100 yards, I could have blown them out of there. But now that I know, where they're coming off these hills, I know when to slow down and really sneak in there and take my time.
Yep. I mean, that's just a really, really good example of using this practice, if you will, the craft of funnel hunting and how it can pay off.
Yep.
It is, we're running short on time here, and we could keep going, but early season, late season on food can be very productive. Another thing about Ohio, Kentucky, is that you can feed there. And that really helps you inventory deer, where you can put feed out, supplemental feed. And you can put cameras on that. It makes it easier to find mature bucks, because it may be in the middle of the night, but at least the caliber deer that you're after is there. The thing about feed is, I have found you absolutely can kill mature bucks on feed, and obviously going to food plots, going to soybean fields, especially early season, late season. But hunting on the actual food is kind of what I have found is normally a one and done thing. Mm-hmm. If you can figure out how those animals are getting to that food and cut them off or funnel them down going to that food, I couldn't believe when I was in Ohio, everybody had an apple pile and a corn pile out. Every single person. People don't want to talk about baiting, but every single person that I ran into and every property I went to had an apple pile and a corn pile, and most guys hunt right over that pile. And if the problem is, in the afternoons, the buck might not have come in, and there'll be 4 or 5 does, or a small buck sitting around, and you've got to get out of there, and you've got to have somebody come bump for you, or you've got to climb down. If that big deer is just out of range, here's you do that, and you blow up the woods. Whereas if you were 150 yards away from that quote-unquote bait pile or that bean field, and you knew the route, or you had funneled that buck from where he's coming from to get to that feed, if you don't get him that night, you can slip down out of that tree and get out, and they're never the wiser. So to and from areas and funnels, even early season, can be more productive. Now, what you have to be careful of is early season, if they're feeding in beans, they're not going to be real far from there. Mm-mm. So if you go bebopping through the woods, you're going to probably blow them out of where they're bedded. So that's a really fine line, and you have to know that property really well and figure out. And how do you do that? You get cameras in there, and you know how far they're coming. A deer I shot in South Carolina this year, he was going over 1.5 miles. I did not – it was a guy saw the buck 1.5 miles in a bean field from where I killed him. And the caretaker told me about the deer, and I got on the map and was looking, and I ended up getting a picture of him, no joke, on another property where I'm a member of a club, 1.5 miles from where this buck was feeding. And it all made sense once you put all the pieces together. It was the only beans around. It was a really thick way he could travel all the way to this spot, and it was a good cool area that he could bed and sleep, and I killed him in the gap between the two.
Yeah, I remember you telling me about him. He was traveling far early season. But it made sense what he was doing. And were there places along the way that he could bed? There sure were, but there was a lot of activity in and out of there. And to go back to the the feed pile or the bait pile, don't get me wrong. If a mature buck was coming into one and I could sit over it, I'm probably gonna sit over it. But I've tried it before. I've never had any luck sitting over a freaking bait pile and shooting a deer worth shooting it. It's always, I call it the poor man's food plot down here, because all my little spots, there's no, unless it's acorns or greenbrier, you're not putting out a camera and getting them a good inventory. So I'll usually go to the center of the property and make like a mineral site, and then sweeten it up with a little yellow acorns every now and then. But I'm always hunting, like you said, those outskirts 80 to 100 yards off, and using the terrain to get in and out without them busting me.
And especially hunting little properties.
Yeah.
They're so delicate, and you can blow them up so fast. And just to, we're running kind of late on time here, and just to kind of wrap this up, if you're going to stack the odds in closing, it boils down to a few things. You've got to have multiple properties to hunt where the caliber deer that you're looking for lives. Mm-hmm. Without that, the rest of it doesn't mean squat. You got to have the properties to hunt. Number two, you need to become, and we all need to become better with our equipment, understand our equipment, test our equipment in hunting situations. That sounds so simple, but you would be amazed at the people that don't do it. Amazed. If it's a super windy day, go shoot your bow out of a tree stand. How far does your arrow drift at 30 yards in a 15-mile-an-hour wind? Mm-hmm. You need to know that stuff. So practice in real-world situations with your equipment. Work on your funnels during the off-season to pinch the deer down. Go learn in February and March what a real funnel is, and look for that big buck sign in the funnel or on either end of the funnel. And look at it from you've got an acorn flat, you've got a cutover. Okay, it makes sense. The deer in November are bedded in that cutover. They're going to those acorns. Find the funnel between the two, enhance that funnel in the off season, tighten it up the best you can, and then get your cameras, get your scrapes, get all that prepped and done July, August, and then get your butt out of there. Maintain your cameras, let them tell you what's going on, and then come end of October or some kind of, unless you're hunting the early season like in Kentucky, leave that out of it. But for the most guys, wait until the right cold, 10 degrees colder than normal in late October, and get ready to grind, because that's what it's going to be, funnel hunting. And I'm telling you guys, please give us feedback. But if you are doing this, you're going to have success. That's it, guys. We appreciate it. Mission Whitetail, episode 19. Feedback, let's hear it. Guys, have a good one. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.